Well, thank you for being here. I think you know who everyone is, but we'll introduce everyone anyway. Kate Winslet on my immediate right.
Hello.
And Seth Rogen. Hi. Danny Boyle. And Aaron Sorkin. So, welcome, and I don't know how many of you saw the film last night, but it was a very exciting evening. And I'd just like to jump right in, and with the beginning there was a word, and Aaron, that starts with you. So I would love to know just the genesis of this. Of course, you did Social Network before, you're kind of in that arena already, but what got you going on the script, and how did you figure out the very novel structure and approach you made towards writing this?
I was called by Scott Rudin and Mark Goodman, one of our producers who's here someplace. They had just bought Walter Isaacson's book and asked me if I wanted to adapt it. Usually when I'm asked to do something, and I badly want to say no, because I know it's going to be a lot of work and I'm frightened to do it. And this was much more than I could. This was really like standing at the bottom of one of these mountains and you're not even able to see the top. But I did say yes before I knew what I was going to do. What I didn't want to do was a biopic. It was a straight up biopic about Steve Jobs. I felt like that structure is something that's familiar to audiences, a kind of greatest hits of the person, a cradle to grave structure, and that wasn't something that I wanted to do. And combining that with, I have, temperamentally as a writer, I'm really a playwright who kind of pretends to write movies. And I just remember that after I'd spent many, many months, you start out by banging your head against the wall and pacing around and you have no ideas. And then I started speaking to people, all the characters who were in the movie, with the exception of Steve Jobs, who had passed away. I spent a lot of time talking to, and spent a lot of time talking to one person that Walter Isaacson was not able to speak to, and that was Lisa Brennan Jobs, who became a very important character in the movie. And then one day I wrote the producers and the studio an email saying what I just told you, that I really didn't want to write a biopic, and that if it were left up to me, what I would do is have the whole movie be 3 scenes that all took place in real time in a very claustrophobic space, and that suited my playwright temperament. I really, you know how if you bring a new puppy home, they tell you to get a crate that is only big enough so that the puppy can turn around, but no bigger, because they like the security of those 4 walls. I really like that too when I'm writing. If I had to write a scene that took place here, I'd lose my mind. I wouldn't know what to do where people were coming in from or where a conversation was taking place. At any rate, I wrote and I said that what I really wanted to do was this thing that sounded like a 3-act play. So can you tell me how close I can come to that? And I didn't think there was any way in the world that a movie studio would let me write that. So I asked, how close will you let me come to that? And they said, no, do exactly that. We really like that idea. So that's what I did. Once I was able to start writing, it was about a year of researching, of talking to people, and then maybe another year of writing. And this will be a way to a segue to Danny. But I thought, you know, what's going to happen when a director looks at this script? I've had, from time to time, I'll be asked to come in and do an uncredited dialogue polish on a movie. It'll usually be an action film where they just kind of want to, can you come in and write quips for the stars a little bit? And I did that once a few years ago on an action movie for a very successful action film director, and I wrote a 3-page scene, and the director read it and said, well, this is fine, but what in the world am I supposed to point the camera at for 3 pages? I thought, point it at the actors who were just saying the things and there'll be a movie. And so with that kind of fear, I thought, you know, what's Danny Boyle going to think when he reads this? What is he supposed to point the camera at?
Just for those of you who haven't seen it, the film is structured in 3 approximately 40-minute scenes, right ramping up in the 40 minutes before the launch of a major product. And how did you select which products? I mean, once you had figured out you wanted to do a 3-act, how did you select what you were going to focus on in each act of the film?
Well, I knew that the first one would be the Mac. It was a big deal. I also, one of the first things I found out was that, this isn't really a spoiler for people who haven't seen the movie, but that they did indeed, they couldn't get the Mac to say hello before the launch. And I thought, okay, that'll be a nice clothesline to kind of hang everything else on. And each act does have that clothesline. In the first act, it's getting the Mac to say hello. In the second act, it's Joanna trying to figure out what it is that Steve's doing. Obviously, there's a trick up his sleeve, and Joanna is trying to disassemble that. And then in the third act, it's Joanna getting Steve to make things right with his daughter. So I wanted to do 1984 because it was such a big moment, because of the ad, because of Hello. I wanted to do Next because he'd been kicked out of Apple and we'd be able to show that. And then I chose the iMac simply because it was his first product coming back to Apple. It was his return to Apple. You know, I've read people be disappointed. You know, gee, why couldn't it be the iPhone or something like that? You can't come to the movie thinking that we're not showing you how any of these things were invented. I don't know how the iPhone works.
So Danny, when you got the script, and I heard it was about a 200-page script. It's loaded with rat-a-tat-tat dialogue all the way through. Was it clear what you were going to point the camera at when you read it, and what did you make of it when you first saw it?
Well, it was amazing actually, because I mean, for me, it's I've been told not to say this, but it's the second part of Social Network. I mean, clearly, I mean, and I found that incredibly useful approaching it, because another director who was originally on this film actually had been through that process clearly of how you somehow translate 185 pages of dialogue into a movie that captivates people. So that was great. It was intimidating, but it was great to know that, because it was also, you could go and look at it, and I looked at it, Social Network, very closely. It's a film I admire enormously. And it was extraordinary to discover the whole film is everybody sitting down all the time. For a major motion picture, that almost the whole movie is the people are sat down. Have a look at it. It's true. And when they do stand up, it's incredibly critical moments that they stand up for. And that's, you're looking really baffled at me. Why is he saying this? But it is a weird thing when you're directing films. You suddenly like, where are people going to sit, stand? Are they going to move in this scene? These are like really fundamental questions. They're not existential questions, but they're really fundamental questions to making a film. And this one, it was clear from the dialogue that, and I assume Aaron had done this deliberately, is that like Jobs himself, it's a film of momentum. People are constantly moving. They never ever sit down, and if they do sit down, it's for very, very significant reasons, really. So it was kind of like, it was lovely to have that inversion in that way. And yeah, you're going to be looking at the actors. And I'd never ever done that before, although I'd come from the theatre. Like Aaron, my training was in the theatre originally, and my love of actors had come from there. I'd never really done a film where it's just the actors. There was always something else to look at that you do with action movies, you know. But in this time it was, and we had this expression that the film was the sound of his mind, really, and that was key for me. That's what we were illustrating, the sound of his mind.
Did you have to work out in your mind, you know, what style you would use to shoot this? Because you could go in different ways with this, I would think. But how did you work out the style? Did you have any principle, you know, organizing principles in terms of how are you going to shoot it?
Yeah, a couple of things. We had an amazing. We wanted this momentum, and so we wanted to use a lot of Steadicam, even though it's not used as you would in an action movie. But it was used to allow us to follow the actors. We had this amazing Steadicam operator called Jeff Healy, who is an artist. and absolutely these guys that testify to it. You know, how he moves around with them and senses them, and then says to me, we'll need a reverse of that on the other side, and stuff like that. It's just amazing guy. But the principles were about making the 3 acts, because they're very repetitive in one sense. They're the same 6 actors launching a product for the same 40 minutes before the launch of the product. We wanted to make each act as different as possible. So the organizing principles in terms of shooting was that the first act would be kind of punkish, really. It would be about young energy, really, which is and he's trying to literally create a modern-day creationish myth. He's trying to establish and make real in front of people. It fails in a way, but ground is set. The second act, which is, I won't tell you about it until you see it, but is much more elegant for very deliberate reasons. It's a very deliberate piece of arch storytelling for very, very deliberate reasons in terms of the plot. And then the third act is about simplicity, really, which he called, borrowing Leonardo da Vinci's phrase, is the ultimate sophistication. And in fact, the products are heading that way, the world vision is heading that way, our communication devices are heading that way. And so we try to gear everything towards that in the third act.
Well, Kate, I'm curious, you play a very, very interesting character, maybe one of the very few who kind of stuck with Steve Jobs for years and years, and in a way could kind of deal with him and stand up to him. How did you get involved with this, and how did you think about your character? Did you meet her and so on? How did you prepare for this film?
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Can I tell the real story of how I got involved, Danny?
Yeah.
Okay.
What happens in Telluride?
Okay, this is... No, I've told it a few times, but never publicly. So, I was working on a film in Australia, and I was fortunate to be working with a really wonderful hair and makeup designer named Ivana Primorak. And in the hair and makeup trailer, you know, you chat about lots of things, love lives, your period, whatever. And we were talking about her next job. She was so excited because she'd had this phone call from Scott Rudin, whom she and I had both worked with several times before, inviting her to be a part of the Steve Jobs movie that Danny Boyle was now directing. Looked like Michael Fassbender was going to be playing Steve Jobs. Wow, this sounds so great. So for sort of 3 or 4 days, I'd arrive at work in the morning, we'd get the coffee on, and I'd say, so, any emails in the night, what's happening, and chit about this job that she is doing. This is her gig, right? She's doing this job. And finally, on about day 4, I went, what's it about? And so she told me, and I went, wow, fuck. She went, oh, the script is so... And I went, hang on. What's the girl's part? Knowing that there would be one. And then she sort of grabbed me and she went, wait. Oh my God, we have to get you the script. We have to, oh Kate, we have to. So then we started to cook up this thing between the two of us, which never happens. I thought, okay, how am I going to get my hands on this hidden, buried script? Like, I mean, when I was finally sent the thing, it was like trying to get into King Tut's tomb, I swear to God, downloading about 5 different apps to just access the fucking thing. And so I thought, okay, I've managed to get myself the script. Oh no, sorry, there's a step that happened before that. So I sat there thinking to myself, okay, how do I convince these filmmakers that I could play this role? I just need to get the script into my hands. Maybe I just look nothing like her. Okay, who is this woman? So I start Googling Joanna Hoffman. I look nothing like her. I thought, excellent, perfect. So I then said to my husband, they're having a mental block about this. Let's get some wigs. And so this is really true. So my lovely husband, Ned, I was off to shoot one day. I said, listen, honey, when I'm at work, would you mind awfully, could you go to a wig shop? And I tell you cannot ever have an ego, guys. And so he said, yep, okay, I'm on it. Okay, wig shop, yep, what do you need? I said, get 3 dark-haired wigs, sort of darkish, brownish wigs, 1 short, 1 medium length, and 1 long. We'll just see which one works. So he did it. I came home from work, fantastic. Stick the wig on my head, throw on some glasses, try and make myself look as Joanna-y as possible. Took a selfie, and sent it to Scott Rudin. And then I get a message, okay, the script's coming, and then I get another message, can Danny come to Melbourne? And then we met, and we had a great 7 a.m. meeting, because I had to go and shoot in the middle of nowhere later that day. And it was just a really wonderful meeting to just sit and share thoughts about the script and about Joanna and her relationship with Steve, which is so special and very, really very unique, because their relationship is founded entirely on mutual respect, actually. And also, she didn't need anything from him. And I say that because it seemed to me as though everyone else in his life really needed something from him for personal gain, whether it was money, whether it was that job, whether it was that promotion, whatever it was. She just needed him to be a decent man. She really did, to be the best version of himself. And she told me that herself. She said she wasn't afraid of him either, because she had grown up in Eastern Europe and she'd had a particular childhood, and she left Armenia for America when she was 14 years old and made quite a journey to get here. And she just had experienced things in her life that meant that she said, this Steve Jobs was like just a frat boy. Like, I was just not afraid of him. She said everybody was like, oh my God. I was like, whatever. I mean, she just didn't, she had no fear at all. And she genuinely did love him. And spending time with her, when I was trying to figure out how the hell I was going to play this fucking difficult, terrible part, she only had wonderful things to say, and would always become quite emotional, actually, and misses him terribly, and really did adore and admire him a great deal.
Was she actually working with him to the very end?
No, in actual fact, no, not until the very end, but their families remained extremely close until the very end.
Seth, what's your wig story?
It's the exact same story.
Yes,
it's so
Seth.
crazy.
Did you get a wig, Seth?
I did. My husband went out and got 3. You do what you got to do.
Yeah, you play an amazing guy, and so I'd love to hear your experiences getting into this part and doing the film.
I just I work with the casting director on our movies who cast this movie. And as a producer, I'd been working with Scott Rudin on a few movies, and I got a call one day saying that if I would come in and audition for the Steve Wozniak role. And I was very flattered, and I was very excited to audition, because I honestly was very, I didn't want to shoehorn myself into something that I wasn't appropriate for, and so the opportunity to read and to have a conversation to make sure that that I actually was the right person for the role in the eyes of the filmmakers and myself was very important to me. And so, I went in and auditioned, which I hadn't done in probably 8 years or something like that. But it was a wonderful process. I got to read Aaron Sorkin dialogue with Aaron Sorkin, which was really exciting. And then I heard nothing for like 8 months, during which time I ruined the studio that was making the movie, and then it had to go somewhere else. And so I was a little worried that might affect their appetite for my involvement. But then, I auditioned in April, and then in December or something, I got a call and be like, they're making the Steve Jobs movie, they still want you in it. And I was like, oh, great, it's perfect. And so and then I got to meet Steve Wozniak a number of times, and he's a very interesting guy who is more than happy to tell you every story that you could ever be willing to ask. I went to the Magic Castle with him in Los Angeles with my wife, and this is probably the definitive Steve Wozniak story, is at the end of the night, I was like, can we walk you out to your car? And he was like, actually, we didn't drive here, we segued here. And they took us to a dark corner of the parking lot where him and his wife had leaned 2 Segways against the wall. And Woz explained that the light was broken on his, so he had a flashlight that he physically held in one hand and segued with the other hand. And I was like, did you get on the Segway bandwagon early? And he was like, this is the first Segway. Like this is serial number 0001 Segway. And so, but truthfully, I mean, the script isn't, the voice of the Woz in the movie isn't quite like the Woz in real life, and that it's and the conversations that Woz has in the movie. I mean, I asked him about all of them. They're all sentiments that he very openly will admit to having. It's just he didn't specifically have them with the people he necessarily had them in the movie with. But he was very insightful, and his feelings towards Steve Jobs are very complex and interesting, and part of it is just taking what he says at face value, and part of it was kind of reading between the lines a little bit. But overall, he made himself very available and I think helped me play the role to some degree. Yeah.
I happened to be sitting one seat away from Wozniak last night at the screening, and he was just carrying on afterwards about he really likes the movie a lot, he said, and that the specifics of what he said and the circumstances weren't exactly true, but all the sentiments and the emotions and the things that were meant to be conveyed in the scene were completely right. And Aaron, I'm just, and Danny too, I'm curious how, given that you weren't reproducing documentary-like reality, but you were obviously wanted to be correct in your attitudes, how did you do that? I mean, how did you come up with those ideas of having Wozniak confront him publicly, something that didn't happen, but the good way to express his character, his complex relationship with Steve Jobs?
From the beginning, I said that I didn't want this to be a biopic. I also didn't want it to be a piece of journalism. And there's a difference between journalism and art. And I had a chance before he died. I made a movie with Mike Nichols. That was also nonfiction. And Mike said, art isn't about what happened. And once I had made the decision to use this structure to identify 5 points of friction in Steve's life with people and dramatize them in this place during this very compressed period of time. It was no longer, we like to say, it's not a photograph, it's a painting. So the fact that a particular conversation never happened, or in actuality it happened 3 years later, wasn't important to me. There was a more important truth that I didn't want to betray. But the fact, for instance, after Steve left Apple, John Scully and Steve never saw or spoke to each other again. So Acts 2 and 3, as far as Jeff Daniels is concerned, are invented. The relationship, Joanna's relationship with Steve, and I spent a lot of time with Joanna Hoffman too, and she, I knew that she was going to be a big character in this. Much of it is imagined. Every once in a while there's a line that I got because Joanna said, when Steve asked, why haven't we ever slept together, that kind of thing, which is a piece of journalism. It's real, and I put it in there. But we never asked, in writing the characters, I wasn't, as like Seth said, I wasn't attempting to do any kind of impersonation of the way this person walks or talks or speaks. We never asked the actors to do that kind of physical impersonation. Some of them found it helpful, like Kate, who really took on Joanna's voice and Joanna's physicality. It works wonderfully well. And whereas Michael, who's I think is giving a phenomenal performance, is really at best nodding his head to the physicality and vocal qualities of Steve Jobs, but I was just doing something else. Ironically, it just opened on Friday, Alex Gibney's documentary on Steve Jobs. You can see a very good piece of journalism on the same subject. This is a painting.
Would you be curious to ever see this done as a theatrical production?
As a play?
Yeah.
Well, now I wouldn't want to see it done any way other than the way Danny has
Very
done
good.
it.
I think we can take a few questions. Don't be shy. Yes, right here.
Question for Aaron. I'm wondering what your writing process is like.
What is Aaron's writing
You're
process
asking what my
like?
writing process is like?
Yeah, thank you. Wondering, what's the process of your end? How do you start off, tackle, the giant feat of writing a screenplay?
To the uninformed, to the casual observer, my early writing process, especially early on, would look a lot like lying on the couch and watching ESPN. But there's stuff going on here. There really is actually a lot of just internal cooking that has to go on before you start writing. I don't like to finger paint. I don't like to sit down and write fade in and let's just explore and see where this goes. I want to be fully loaded up, and as a writer, I kind of worship at the altar of intention and obstacle. Somebody wants something standing in their way of getting it. And that has to be present in every scene. And once I know what that is, okay, Joanna's got to convince Steve, please do not go out there and say that we're going to sell 1 million in the first 90 days and 20,000 a month after that. It's going to be a disaster. Don't do that. And Steve is a formidable obstacle, and Joanna is a formidable force. Once you have that, you can use that as a taut clothesline on which to hang the things that the scene and ultimately the movie are really going to be about.
Can I ask you a question, actually?
Yes.
Which is on the subject of your question as well. Because I sort of picture you writing. Do you say all of the actors' dialogue out loud to yourself, or do you have an assistant with you in the room? How do you do that?
No, nobody's anywhere near me. I can't.
Are you in a small cage, Aaron? Is it a small cage? Do you have a doggy bowl?
I do act it out while I'm writing it. I'm saying it out loud. Sometimes I'm very physical when I'm writing, and sometimes if I'm very excited, if it's going well, I will forget to be typing. I start wandering around and talking. I'll end up 2 blocks from my office. I once, back in the West Wing days, I like writing in my car a lot. I don't mean, I have my hands on the wheel, but talking out loud, starting arguments with myself. And the head of NBC messengered over a headset to be paired with your car phone and a note that said, I was stopped next to you at a red light. Please always wear this. You look like a madman in your car. So it's, when it's going well, that's what it looks like. But the thing is, and this is for, there may be people here who are writing and struggling with something. I have far fewer good writing days than bad writing days. Most days end with your having not done anything and not knowing what you're going to do tomorrow. They end with most days you feel stuck and you feel like not only are you not going to be able to write this, you're never going to be able to write anything again. And what I really envy about Danny's job, as hard as it is, and I mean it's hard, it is a dawn to dusk, backbreakingly hard job. But what I envy about it is that he may have a bad day from time to time, I don't know, but at the end of the day, he's done a day's work. And that's not true for me. I get to the end of days and nothing has happened because I just couldn't think of anything. I just couldn't block it. And well, I was about to say, you get scared because you know that, Kate Winslet's going to read this, or Seth Rogen's going to read this, or Danny Boyle is going to read this, and it needs to be good. At the very least, it needs to be there. It's my writing process.
Yes, over here.
Can I ask Seth Rogen a question? Your early exposure in comedy and your earlier roles, do you feel that it's an impact on the way you get into dramatic roles now? And have you been to the dispensary since you've gotten here?
Yeah, I think what's happened. This movie, I mean, I've worked on slightly dramatic movies before. I think even for a dramatic movie, this movie was approached pretty unconventionally as far as how it was actually executed, in that we would rehearse for several weeks and then shoot an act for several weeks and then stop production and rehearse for several weeks and then start again and shoot for a few weeks and then stop and rehearse for a few weeks and then shoot for a few weeks, which is completely unheard of as far as I'm concerned. And so I think comedian or not, it was an unconventional process for the actors, but in a way the greatest process you could ever ask for, because you could really see what it would be like to be involved in these situations in the time frame that they were supposed to exist in. But before we would go perform each act in front of the cameras, we were able to do it pretty much like a play in real time, and we would do it in this big empty room basically, and it would play like a play, and it would take the exact amount of time to do it as it now takes to watch it in the movie. And it was amazingly beneficial just to see, he would literally have me be going from this conversation to this conversation, and I'd be waiting in this room as he's having that conversation. And it was a rare treat for immersing yourself in the film, because you pretty much got to do it and then do it, which is not always how it is. Sometimes you've literally never met the person until you start filming, and so it was an unconventional but an incredible process to be a part of. Yeah.
Danny, I wonder if you could just briefly say, is this something, this structure of shooting in this way, was this something you insisted upon when you came onto the project? And how much time did you take off, and then how much time did you have for rehearsal before you shot each segment?
Yeah, that was one of the. Actually, the first time I read the script, I remember thinking that's the only way you can do this. Those of you who haven't seen it, you have long scenes, and they're 6-8 minutes long, and you read them, and when you read them like that, whoosh, and you think, well, normally what happens in a movie is that you break every scene down into little bits. As Oliver Stone said, you make a film inch by motherfucking inch. Literally, and it's true. And I thought that won't work. We will not be able to do that, because the flow of the material, the rhythm of the dialogue is such that you've got to let the actors complete the scene. And you'll discover things in letting them run it and complete it like that. So we decided to switch the process round, and we took it apart in editing. So we shoot long takes, but they're not long takes like Birdman's long takes. They're not about kind of keeping going in possible places. It's actually just allowing actors to actually complete the full scene. And some takes will be better than others. And then our editor, Elliot Graham, who's an amazing editor, would find the best of the actors in those scenes and begin to cut them together. And so that's the experience you have. And so I thought the only way that we'll be able to do that is to ask the actors to learn the parts, almost as though it is a play. Yeah. And that meant, given the length and the size of it, it meant you thought, well, let's break it into 3. It will also allow us to just concentrate on 1984. Because how do you tell a difference between a character in 1984 and 1988? 4 years is nothing. And yet if you do it separately, the actor can just go, I've finished 84 now, and now I'm 4 years older. What do I look like? What do I feel like? What do I wear differently? All that kind of stuff. It allowed them to differentiate that. So those were the set principles. And the other principle that we had was to do it in San Francisco. Because it's mostly interiors inside theaters, you could actually shoot it anywhere. And they wanted us, for obvious reasons, to shoot it where there are tax breaks, like Atlanta, Georgia, like London, like Hungary, and because there were huge tax breaks. But we insisted on doing it in San Francisco because it's an extraordinary place, as you all know, better than me. But it is the Bethlehem of the Second Industrial Revolution, really. That's where these extraordinary forces emerge that now are dictating our lives. And that's why, whatever you think about making a film about Steve Jobs, that's why these scripts, like Social Network, like this one, and like another one where I think he should write, and you should urge him to do it, like to make it a trilogy. That's why these scripts and films have to be made about these people. Because benign as they seem, they are creating forces that are more powerful than governments, that are more powerful than banks, and they don't seem interested in money. Do you find that? I find that extraordinary. Have you read The Circle? I'm recommending it, the Eggers book. It's just an amazing book about this, what we're moving into now. And it's like a whole paradigm shift that we're kind of blissfully walking into, where they don't see money, they're not interested in money, they really aren't. They're interested in data, really. And it's our data. So I think these films need to be made like, sorry, I've wandered off. But that was the reason for San Francisco, anyway, to shooting in San Francisco.
Yeah. Yes, right here.
Hi, my name is Greg. I'm a film student at the University of Colorado Boulder. I have a question for Seth. So I know that you do a lot of movies where you write your own movies. So how was it different interpreting Aaron's dialogue?
It was an enormous relief. He's a much better writer than I am, so that made it a lot better. It's a real relief, honestly. I as much as I like controlling every element of what I'm working on, at times it's a wonderful relief to have very little control over what you're working on, and to truly hand yourself over to someone else. And as an actor, I often think of myself as like a specifically shaped tool. And someone at times needs that tool for the thing they're making, and sometimes they don't need that tool. And when I'm needed as that tool, and the analogy I understand is not lost on me, but when I'm needed as the tool, I'm more than happy to serve the part of just being one of the 1,000 elements that are making this machine come to life, and to serve someone else's vision wholeheartedly. Also, because when I have actors in my movies, as much as I like input and discussion, at times I want them to just shut up and say what we wrote. So I'm sympathetic to that, and so it really is. And improvising, honestly, is incredibly stressful and incredibly draining, and it's very difficult to be expected to come up with something new and funny take after take, for 13 hours a day, and at times, as many of you have seen in theaters, it is just impossible. So so again, it was as stressful as it was to step into a world that I'm not generally a part of, and to undertake, scenes that are, expansive in length compared to what I'm generally having to memorize. It was a lot of fun, and I think the fact that I auditioned and I knew that I was the tool they wanted was an enormous relief to me, and I felt like these guys are smart. They wouldn't have picked me if they didn't think I could do it, so I'll just do my best, and hopefully I won't ruin the movie. And I don't think I did, so it's great.
I just like a brief question to Seth and Kate. The energy level in the film is extremely high, and I mean, what does Danny do as a director to keep that energy level going? And did you do lots and lots of takes, to just over and over again, all this fast dialogue, or so it's a two-part question.
Well, Danny, we would actually, forgive me for this, Danny, but we would actually joke that Danny had some sort of physical Tourette's, because he doesn't actually stop moving, and I'm going to impersonate you right now. We would run lines, and Danny, I swear, would do this. I kid you not. No. And quite honestly, it was, no recollection of that, no, none. But Danny does have extraordinary energy, truly extraordinary energy, and that does have an effect not just on the actors, but on the crew. It does, and also, and you hate compliments, I know this, I'm going to say it anyway, Danny's an incredibly nice guy, and as a consequence, you do want to do your best for somebody who's an incredibly nice guy, not just the actors, but the crew as well. And as Danny was saying, we did this extraordinary thing of rehearsing and then shooting and really learning all of our lines absolutely before we even rolled the cameras. And what that did is not only did it set the bar very high for any other actor coming in who had smaller roles, even if they were just day players. They would step into such a well-oiled machine. With Fassbender, I'm telling you, he was driving that freight train at the speed of lightning. I mean, it was incredible what he did. And we all just really fell into this pattern of working very, very hard and really hoping to Christ we weren't going to fuck up. Because if you forget your lines in an 11-page dialogue scene, you really are responsible for everybody else and everything that happens around you, and you just really don't want that to happen. Seth was saying that last night he was watching the movie and was still kind of hoping that he wasn't going to fuck up.
Still worried, yeah. And Dan, there's no like chairs on set. Like you literally don't sit down. Like it's.
And there was nothing to eat.
There's an enormous amount of energy, yeah. But also, like for a movie that is visually impressive, like you shoot very fast. Also, like there's not a lot of downtime. Like there is a real momentum and a real energy, and it's not like a, incredibly anal, like which is so bizarre for me to watch because I was watching and everything is framed perfectly, and it feels as deliberate as anything could be. But as we're doing it, it feels very. Like I don't want to say freewheeling, but it felt like it had a real momentum to it and an energy, and that there was some discovery happening in the moment, which is very exciting to be a part of. But then you watch it and it couldn't seem more deliberate, which is what I was so impressed by.
Good. So a couple more. Just the lady in back there. Yeah. No, wait. Well, okay, there's two. You and then the one seated with the hat.
Go on, go for it.
Okay.
In the film Fassbender, as Ghost, washing the seat in the toilet of the day behind a barrier. It's a little peculiar, and I thought everything is so edited. Everything has some purpose. Do you have a quirk? Did you do that? Was it something you did because you went barefoot, or was it something that Fassbender improvised? What did that play in? What was that about?
No, he used to do that apparently. I mean, that's one of, what Aaron was saying about a kind of almost journalistic tick, a moment that you just find where you reference something that's known or gossiped about, as a kind of, it's gestural. You're making kind of gestures towards what you believe is the real figure, really, in a way. But it's gestural rather than slavish. And it was entertaining for that. I mean, it is a peculiar thing, and I can't remember who said it about him, but a number of people said that he would rinse his feet in the toilet, yeah. And also, I'm a British filmmaker, and British films always have to have at least one scene in a toilet in their movie. And I've done a very good scene in a toilet in a film, Trainspotting. So it's always a good idea to reference it.
Your charm.
Well, we'll look for that in every movie you make, Danny. Yes, right here.
Well, when I did Heavenly Creatures, if you don't mind me correcting you, okay. I was 17 years old, and I had. First of all, it has such a special place for me, and I remember it all like yesterday. It was a properly life-changing experience, not just as a young actress, but as a person. I went to New Zealand for 3.5 months to make that film, and it was the first time I'd ever auditioned for a film and had a film script in my hands, and they really did put me through it. I mean, I auditioned many times, 4 or 5 times, with Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh in the room. And then they similarly to Seth on this movie, they just made me wait for ages and ages until I was working in a deli one day, which was my part-time job at the time, and the telephone rang, and I don't know what it was. It was something about the way the telephone rang. I just kind of knew that it was a phone call from my agent. It was bizarre. And sure enough, it was the agent telling me that I had been given this part. And I mean, I really just couldn't believe it, and almost still to this day can't believe how fortunate I was. And it's not just that I was fortunate to get to play that part, but a lot of actors do their first and their second, their third movie, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh movie, and then it's only by the time they get to their eighth movie that people might start to sort of notice them or talk about them. I was so lucky for many different reasons with that film. It was the quality of the screenplay, which was just extraordinary, the intensity of that true story between those two young girls, and that it was Peter Jackson. And the combination of those things as my first film, I mean, I have so much to be thankful for, and it taught me such a great deal. I can't even begin to explain. I remember getting to the end of the shoot and desperately wanting to go back to the beginning and just do it all over again because I'd learned everything by that point. It was the most extraordinary feeling. It changed me dramatically being a part of that film.
Just a couple more gentlemen here. Yes, you.
I was just wondering, like, coming into the project, was there any like trepidation, like, you know, I guess for you, Sorkin, would be like coming off a Social Network, or maybe for Seth and you guys working with Danny Boyle, was there just any like, was there any qualms going into the project at all?
Well, I had a lot of, I wouldn't call them qualms as much as, you know, straight up fear. For a number of reasons. The same fear I would have before I would write anything, that I don't have an idea yet, so I don't know what this is going to be. When it comes to Steve Jobs, he's somebody who a lot of people have very strong feelings about. So it was a little bit like you know, setting out to write about the Beatles. So there was that added nervousness.
No, I had none. I was just psyched to be invited. Yeah.
I was honestly, I was really excited, but scared as well. There's one scene in the third act that I remember reading and just crying because I just thought, oh, fuck. I'm not going to be able to do that. I mean, I can't, because the way that this was shot, as we've said, in these long continuous takes, you know, often if there's a really punchy moment or a very emotional moment, you know, you have the luxury with film of, you know, you have wide shots and mid shots and two shots and close-ups, and you can often get around difficult moments by saying, actually, can we cut there, and I can get myself into the zone, and then we'll go. Fuck that. I mean, we didn't have that on this film. It just all ran into one. So it really was a case of if you can't do it, you can't do it, and you won't have been able to do it, and then your name will be shit, and your career's going to go into the toilet. And this one scene I really was terrified to shoot, and dreading it, actually. And when the day came that we had to shoot that scene, I honestly think I was nearly sick. But Michael was, I mean, just to speak for Michael, who obviously isn't here, he was, you know, he turned his proper, true, I think, white, blind fear into the most incredible determination that any of us have ever seen. And I do have to speak to that in his absence, because I have really never seen anything like it. And he just did it with no fuss, no people fussing around him, no tricks, no note cards, you know, like he really just got on with it. And I would regularly say to him, listen, if you want to just run lines, you know, on a Sunday, no, I got it, I got my thing, I'm fine. I mean, he sort of disappeared into a hole and emerged as Steve Jobs and knew all his fucking lines. Yeah. I mean, it was really, wasn't it?
It was amazing, yeah. And I remember actually the first day of rehearsal, I went over to him and I was like, so are you like a weird actor? Like, should I not like talk to you between takes or shit like that? I was just like, I've heard people are like that. I don't know. And he was like, no, not at all, man. He's like, talk to me about whatever you want. And he truly was like that. Like it was, and we would run lines and stuff between takes, but it was very casual. Like and then he would just go into it, and it was horrifying at times. And it made the performance like it made it much. I mean, when you have someone who's amazing that you're acting with, it makes acting much easier in a lot of ways. And he was just like there, and you felt like you were talking to this guy, and it was truly unsettling and at times, but ultimately he was it was like Kate said. I mean, I haven't seen people probably undergo the challenges acting-wise as Kate had, but for me, it's the most impressive thing I've ever seen an actor do. And I've worked with Danny McBride, so no.
Yes, right here. The blue shirt, yes.
To everyone, do you know when your script or your film or your performance is done? Like, do you feel like, okay, this is it, it's done? Or is it just you run out of time and it's like, okay, here it is? Or do you have a sense of completion?
No, we introduced the film last night and we said it's not quite finished, which it isn't. It's released in America on October the 9th. And Elliot Graham, the editor who's here, and I are working on it all the time. And you have to be dragged away at the end. I mean, literally, that is the only thing people can do. They literally, I remember when we were shooting Slumdog Millionaire in India, Christian Coulson, the producer, is also here. He eventually went home with the checkbooks eventually, because it was the only way he could stop us shooting was to just dry up the money. And so you never ever feel it's complete or finished or good enough, really. You're always trying to kind of do more if you can, really. You know.
No, it's true. Yeah.
Last question, the lady right here.
Hi, I'm an aspiring writer and director, so I'm wondering what your relationship was throughout the process of the film, how you two worked together, and kind of if you had any like huge moments of contention.
Yeah, guys.
We're having one right now.
We are still arguing about a couple of things.
As a matter of fact, yeah, as Danny said, it's not done. It needs to be locked in 2 weeks. I'm giving Danny this day, and that's it. Tomorrow I start hammering him again on there are just 2 small moments in the 3rd act. But I love Danny from our first meeting. I'd been a huge fan of his work until then, but then we met in New York, and I liked him very much personally, and I was excited by everything that he was saying about the script and what he pictured and what he imagined, and it's been a very happy, fun, a lot of the times, but most importantly, a very fruitful relationship. And I won't speak for Danny, but I hope that this will just be the first time we work together.
So yeah, well, he's probably very intimidating. You think of him as a very intimidating, the track record and obviously the kind of just the quality of the work. But if you come up with a good idea, if you've got a good idea and you can explain it to it, Aaron will just do it for you. He'll just do it like that. I mean, he'll just and hand it in, didn't he? He would just like hand in stuff.
It was shocking. Yeah, I couldn't believe how. Yeah, it was again. And I was saying it to Kate. I mean, like. My perception of you, honestly, was much different than the real you. In that, I found you to be, the reputation is that you're very strict, and that it's like could be a very big debate to maybe change a word here or there. But I found that to be could not have been further from the truth. And you were amazingly accommodating, and you kind of just remind me of like the best substitute teacher I've ever had in a lot of ways. So, yeah.
All right, well, on that note, I just want to, oh, yes, Aaron, you get the last word. I guess you get the first word, you get the last word.
Because we were talking a while back about, Seth doing drama, which was not at all surprising to me. In fact, I'm going to take the credit and say that Seth was my idea.
As a human.
There was no pushback at all on that. Everybody thought it was a great idea. But I've found that people who can do really smart comedy, and Seth is an actor, he's not a comedian, are actually going to be the best at it. But what was surprising to me is that Kate Winslet is one of the funniest people you are ever going to meet in your life. Somebody really needs to do some kind of great remake of The African Queen, if you would ever be willing to get in your water again. But somebody needs to do that. You would blow the screen
Let's
apart.
just make out.
All right, well, we'll wait for that. Okay. Thank you so much for bringing your film and for coming out this morning.